Hello, welcome to the Hitout Zero Hangers weekly AFL podcast. I'm in the host chair this week with Phoenix recovering from Magic Round, and it was a big episode. We got all our hot takes out of the way quite quickly. Footy Stonks returned. Look at Tassie and who they could be targeting now that they've locked in their recruitment team. A little look at the Dogs and how well they're going. And we named some potential first-time All-Australians. All that and more on today's episode. Hello, welcome to the Hitout, episode 10 for the year, I think. So we're getting underway. Feels like we're at the halfway point of the year, but it's only round 8. And we've got plenty to chat straight off the weekend. How was your weekend, by the way? As a Geelong fan asks a Collingwood fan after Saturday night.
I'm pretty objective in saying it was a great game. That Saturday night one. Would have been fitting if Jack Crisp that is, end up kicking the goal after the sign in his milestone match, but it wasn't to be this week. So I guess kudos to the Cats for getting the dub. Yeah,
I was there. One of the best games I can remember being at in the last few years. And yeah, the Geelong-Collingwood rivalry is not something that probably gets talked about like a Geelong-Hawthorn or a Carlton-Collingwood, but you date back to the 07 prelim. And since then, probably played off in the finals 6 or 7 times in that span. And Collingwood have had the better of Geelong. Geelong have had the better of Collingwood. You had the 2011 grand final. You have the 2009 and 10 prelims. And 2022 qualifying final a few years ago as well. And then plenty of home and away classics between those two. So I think it's certainly built up to be quite a decent rivalry over the past decade and a half. So the build-up was massive. The game itself felt like a final. And then the finish, even though, I'm obviously going to lean towards the Cats. I wouldn't have minded Jack Crisp kicking that goal, to be honest. It was just so well scripted.
Adding further salt to the wound
I think there was 4 minutes left and Collingwood went down by 3 goals, and the amount of Pies fans that left after that Jack Bowes goal they would have been pretty upset with what turned out, but still didn't miss out on a win. But it was fantastic late work from Collingwood to get that to at least give themselves in reaching distance, and it's probably the highlight game of the weekend, no doubt. And to kick off the show, we're going to talk about some of the hot takes. There's 30 AFL shows a week now, and we only add to that pile. So we feel like there's always going to be a lot of hot takes that you can kind of take in. So we're going to do hot takes in a cold minute, being a lot of hot takes in a very quick time, just to get them out of the way and get into the rest of the show. I think a lot of the big discussion is going to be on Saturday night. You have the Bailey Smith, you have the Bobby Hill tackle. You have that touched, or was it touched? So it's just a headline of few. So we're going to roll into probably a dozen of these quick hot takes, and let's just get them out of the way in the first minute or two.
Yep.
So Bailey Smith drama. Happy with that?
Yep.
Yeah, I like it. Yep, love it. A couple of weeks from now, we'll have Cats Dogs on Thursday night footy.
Round 11.
Look forward to it. Bobby Hill tackle. Should have been a free kick for Geelong or Collingwood?
I'm trying not to talk about the bias here. I'm not going to be quick. I'll say yes, because I saw one yesterday between Hawthorn and Richmond where Sicily got rewarded the free kick against Morris Rioli for his chase down tackle, so to speak. So I'll say yes also for the theatre and the drama as well.
Yeah, I didn't see the Sicily one, but I heard about it. I think Bobby probably deserved a free kick for that chase down effort, but I thought it's like letter of the law kind of stuff. Yeah. It's probably still a trip. So lose if you're an umpire, really, which is always the case. Blitzer, did he touch it or not?
It looked like there was a gap between his hand, but again, I think I've got the Collingwood glasses on. So
I think I'm with you. I don't think it's hard. I don't think it was conclusive evidence either way, which makes it inconclusive, which means the soft call is kind of what gets paid. And if we don't have review technology, that's what gets paid. So it's a real frustrating one. I can understand for Collingwood fans, particularly with how the game finished up as well.
Yeah.
Few other results from the weekend. Port Adelaide got smashed by the Dogs.
Huge.
What does that mean for Ken's future? Do you reckon he coaches out the year?
Yeah. I think they've locked into, just given the 2025 year, they've already got the succession plan in place for Josh Carr. So just giving it, I know there's always going to be a lot of noise around big losses like that. I think it was his second biggest loss ever, with his first coming in round 1 against Collingwood this year. So a bit interesting, but I think, more noise, the less noise about it, the better, I think, for Port, and obviously for Ken as well, who's been huge for that club for over a decade.
Yeah, I don't see him stepping aside and bringing that succession plan in any earlier. Justin Longmuir's future. That was obviously quite an interesting pre-season contract call for them. He's got a 12-month payout though, so any quick call that they make is going to work in his favour a little bit. What do you reckon?
I'm not too sure what he's doing. He's got probably one of the most talented lists in the competition, but just can't seemingly get it. And I think the thing that kind of Matt has questions over him is the fact they were so good defensively and they've lost that completely. So it was always their attacking flair that they lacked in years gone by, including that final series they made in 2022, I believe it was. But I guess this year alone, their defense has gone out the window too. So not only is one aspect of their game down, is obviously their one wood as well is pretty shocking at the moment.
Yeah. Sorry that we aren't talking about the Saints fans, because I think it was a pretty deserving win, probably warranting a bit more discussion. Next one up, Saints, frauds or finals contenders?
Suns?
Sorry, the Suns.
Yeah, sorry.
Saints probably actually another question, but we'll go. Sorry, the Suns.
Suns, yeah, finals contenders. I don't think yesterday's loss or Sunday's loss over Brisbane it's just a blimp. They've been super so far, but I think it is a watch. They've had a pretty easy run up until now, and I guess against a genuine contender and obviously the reigning premier, they failed.
Max Gawn is looking at an 8th All-Australian. That'd be record tying.
Yep.
Yeah, I think he might have just taken over Tom DeConing in the last fortnight as that favourite for the AA Blazer ruck spot. Dangerfield, record-breaking 9th.
Love this call. And I think as well, we kind of the All-Australian team tends to kind of chuck a really good midfield off the half-forward line.
Yeah.
We know Dangerfield is now playing almost permanently forward with maybe Burst in the midfield. So I'd like to see him, again, if he continues this strong form, up forward, forward pocket, half forward. But he's killing it at the moment.
He is. Obviously just 8 weeks in, but those 8 weeks are, quite a strong shout for his case as a 9-time All-Australian, which would be the most ever. Do the Dogs need to re-sign Bevo ASAP, or should they wait until later in the year?
Well, I think he kind of works under pressure the best. So I know it's probably interesting. People probably prefer security, but I feel like every time his back's against the wall in terms of any kind of circumstance over his tenure at the Bulldogs, he continues to perform. We obviously saw the extensive injury list up until this point and even going still at the Bulldogs, and he continues to find ways to pull these performances out of the hat. So I think at the moment it looks like externally, the perfect, I guess, solution in terms of just waiting it out and then go from there.
Yeah, his commentary's been quite interesting, saying that he wants to be coaching there, but doesn't want to overstay his welcome. Has been quite an interesting term he's used. Next one, Carlton, they're going to make finals?
No.
Oh, there we go. And then last one, do West Coast need to be asking for a priority pick?
I think I'm not too sure of the timing of it, but depending on what they do in the trade space and free agency space. So obviously Harley Reid is linked to a move back to Victoria, Oscar Allen as well, even Liam Ryan has been floated as a potential target. So if those 3 players do depart, which I'm not saying they will, but West Coast could end up with 3, 4, 5 first round picks, or picks in the top 30 or 40. So when the AFL looks at potentially as something like that, would they go, oh, here we go, might give you another one? Not too sure, but I think it may be a wait just on this year, and then obviously if they're terrible next year, I think it might be worth asking.
Yeah, I think they can ask, but I don't think they should be getting one this year at least. Hasn't been the greatest start, but I don't think they should be asking for one just yet. That wraps up Hot Takes, Cold Minute. Footy Stonks is back. So happy with first ep of every month. We'll be checking in on our folders. You weren't here for our first episode of doing it. So it was Cal, Darren, Phoenix.
Yep.
So quick recap on last month's, market purchases. So I went with Shares and Archie Roberts. Very happy with that. I think they're doing quite well. Even picked up his Rising Star nomination a couple of weeks ago and has been playing great footy for the Bombers. Jake Saligo started off well. I think he's kind of maybe taken a step back the last couple of weeks, but that's a long-term investment. That's fine. And then Melbourne's midfield, I kind of flagged, once they got Cozzy back, and they got Trent Rivers finally being able to play a bit more midfield time, it'd probably allow a bit more pressure off Petrarca and Oliver. Obviously, Oliver not playing at the moment, but Track's been looking good when he's going in there, but he's still playing a lot of time forward, and their midfield is still performing well. So I'm pretty happy with that investment. Let's have a look at some of the others. So Cal bought Seth Campbell. I think you'd be loving that. It might be the best performing purchase we've had so far in Footy Stonks. Cam McKenzie, solid. I think steadily rising.
Yep.
No massive jump. Had stocks in Gold Coast, which probably took a hit over the weekend. But as you mentioned before, I think a long-term, could be interesting to see how that goes by the end of the year. And then he shorted St Kilda, which has probably been a bit up and down. So that'll be quite an interesting one to watch. I did short the commentary around Bevo. Now, I think that was more around the criticism, so I think that's certainly faded, but the commentaries remain quite strong. Darren bought stocks in the Dogs, who it's rising quite nicely. Sam Davidson's been quite solid for the Bulldogs and has featured in our rookie rankings for most of this year. And then Nate Caddy probably hasn't been the steady rise we would like, but again, long-term investment. And then Phoenix bought Libba, who... it's blue chip stuff. That's going to be quite reliable for the long haul. Let's get into this week's purchases to add to our portfolios. Who are you buying?
Well, adding to mine, Jack Higgins, Matthew Kennedy, and Tom Atkins. So they're the three. Probably all underrated in their own right. You got Jack Higgins, who obviously plays for St Kilda. They've been topsy-turvy in terms of their form as a club. But he's kicked goals in every game. I think only the win against Fremantle was his only game where he didn't kick multiple goals.
Yeah, right.
So he sits with 21 for the season thus far. I think it's top 3 or 4 in the common race. Now, that's pretty impressive for a small forward in a team of, St Kilda's caliber. That's not necessarily the biggest scoring club in the competition. Matthew Kennedy crossed from Carlton. He was kind of a forgotten man in that 4-club trade, with obviously Bailey Smith and the Cats moving as well.
Yep.
And Jack McRae obviously as well. So he's filled the role perfectly, especially since, there was a lot of injuries to Treloar, Bontempelli. And he's kind of taken that contested role to allow players to flourish on the outside. And then Tom Atkins, he does all the grunt work that, allows Bailey Smith to rack up 30 touches against 700 metres gained. Same as Max Holmes. I think he's leading the, tackles in the competition.
Yep.
And up there with contested possession as well. So I think, it's more just I'm buying them just to say, hey guys, you guys are doing super so far. But also expect them to continue their impressive form.
Yeah, I think if you bought those 3 in the preseason, you'd be a pretty rich man. But I think still just under that top price. So you've probably got a bit of potential to move up there. I'm going Adelaide's backline. I really wanted to go Josh Worrell. I really wanted to go Max Michelani. I just thought, let's just take the group. I think what they did over the weekend against Carlton was fantastic. Doing that without Nick Murray as well, who's been, quite a big piece for them down back. And when he has played, they've looked really strong. And then it was great to see how well they performed down back. Josh Worrell, like I said, probably the one I wanted to buy stock in. His pace is what really surprised me. Like, he's been so good in the air and at ground level, but when the ball hit the deck, I think it was coming out the back on a Carlton transition, he outruns Jesse Motlop and prevents a goal for the Blues. And that was, quite stellar to see from a medium-sized defender of his size, though, coming up against a speedy Blues forwards. He's one. Chankut Jath, I'm going to buy in. Looked really good on Sunday. Yeah, it's against the Tigers, but I think he's going to look a bit more comfortable in his role, and hopefully the injuries just stay away a little bit. And then one I'm going to buy in is Cal Wilkie and his All-Australian selection chances. I think he's going to be back in that side. If we're picking one right now, I think he'd be a great chance. He's been rock solid for them. And while there's been a couple games where their defense has been a bit flaky, he's been the lone soldier down back who's just stood tall every game. And he's just been absolutely fantastic for Ross Lyon this year. So I think a second All-Australian jumper could be coming his way.
I like it.
And then shorting. So kind of going the other way. We've got a couple of teams that we think might just be turning the wrong way over the next few months. Yeah,
well, although Gold Coast have started brilliantly to this season, the loss to Brisbane, I think, was damning. Now, I guess I know it is 1 week. They still sit 5-2. I think well and truly in the top 4, definitely top 6. But they've got a difficult 3 weeks. Bulldogs, Hawthorn, both games in Darwin. Now, the Suns love it up there. Bit of a happy hunting ground, a second home, away from home. But the Bulldogs in such great nick, and then Hawthorn everyone expects to be top 2 or top 4 at least. So they're going to be 2 difficult matchups. And then you've got St Kilda, who seemingly are plucky every now and then, and they like to take scalps. And I think they also match up pretty well against the Suns as well. So again, I'm only saying this because they've had an easier run, the Suns, but now they've got a 3-week period where you'd hope that at least come away with 2 victories. If not, their finals chances could kind of start to dim a little bit and then put them back into that middle ranking.
Yeah, certainly a threat on their premiership credentials at the very least. I'm going to short Carlton. I know they're probably not at the highest price anyway at the moment, but St Kilda this week is going to be quite a fascinating one to see where they come out. And I think if we were doing this next week, that would give me a great indication of where the Blues might be at. So I think if they lose to the Saints and they have a pretty difficult run after that one as well, it's going to be quite interesting to see where they sit this time next month. So yeah, an eye on the Blues for me and just how well they're going to be performing over the next month or so. So maybe a more of a short-term investment might pull that back out when we do our stonks next month. wrap it up there. Yeah, can't wait to see how some of those unfold over the next month and into the back end of the season. Some news this week that we want to kind of just touch on a little bit and then expand on is the Tassie Devils locking in their list management and recruitment lead. So they got Derek Hine and Todd Patterson appointed to the recruitment and list management leading roles respectively for the Devils. So Derek Hine is the former Collingwood recruiter, and Patterson moves from the Demons straight out of their system. So two names who have been around the business for a little bit. Hine obviously quite an experienced recruiter and has done pretty solid job, I think, for Collingwood over a long period of time. And then Patterson, a lesser known name, but kind of that second in command a little bit with Melbourne. So another couple big names ticked off for the Devils as they plan for 27-28.
Yeah, well, they definitely needed some experienced heads. They've been putting Brendan Gale as a CEO from the Tigers, so they needed people who've been there before, done it before. And Hines done that. He was Collingwood, I think, for just over 2 decades. He had big hands in making sure they got players like Steele Sidebottom, Dale Thomas, Scott Pendlebury, as well as Jordan DeGoey, Darcy Moore. I know he was a father-son, but players that played pivotal roles in both the premierships in 2010 and also 2023. Yep. And Patterson, obviously, as you mentioned, moved from the Demons. I think he was there for 8 years, if I'm not mistaken. And again, someone who's got that experience and the know-how in terms of helping build a premiership list or ensuring that they get players in to contend for finals and also flags as well. So 2 good gets for the Devils. And as they start making their way into the competition in a couple of years' time, these guys play huge parts in developing that list.
So they sit down, first meeting. They've got the big whiteboard up. Who are the names do we think that could be up there? So if you look at the off-contract names in 2027, Alex Pearce might be one of them, just given, I think he's the only Tasmanian player whose deal runs out when Tassie are likely to hit that off-season window. And just given his leadership, his experience, he's going to be a bit on the older side, but you get him for a year, maybe 2 max, and you can get him into some mentoring or coaching or something. It's going to would be a pretty nice get for them. But just some of the other names: Tom Green, Kitty Coleman, Heath Chapman, Trent Rivers, Nick Martin, Luke Jackson, Chad Warner, Bone McCreary, Will Day, Lockie Ash, Charlie Comben, Sam DeConing, Tom McCartan, Jack Sinclair, Josh Worrell, Noah Anderson, Zach Merritt, Caleb Sarong, Tom DeConing. I think there's a few other pretty big names that aren't on that list that you probably just think, I don't think they're going to be going anywhere, or they're probably going to be retired or what have you, come that point of their career. And then the other part is probably the Tassie targets. So these aren't necessarily going to be off contract in that time, but they're going to have some concessions that will certainly help them in trying to lure contracted players just as well as off-contracted players. You look at Colby McKercher, Riley Sanders, Ari Schoenmaker, James Leake, Lockie Cowan, Chase Jones, Geordie Payne, Sam Banks, Ryan Mansell, Seth Campbell could be a pretty fascinating one given the trajectory his career's on, and then Jake Kolodjasny, more of an older option as well. So looking at kind of those 2 lists, who kind of stands out to you, and who would be at the top of their whiteboard, do you think?
Yeah, well, definitely. I like the local talent, the Tassie targets, as you did mention, like McKercher and Sanders. They look like they're going to be 2 superstars of the competition. I really like what Sanders is doing as well for the Bulldogs. They kind of, was born a bull in a china shop last year. Played a lot of VFL football, a lot as a sub. Now he's been given, many permanent minutes in the senior side as well. So he's obviously, as you mentioned, that trajectory, he's going to be a superstar. So I think that the local talent is probably where they need to start focusing first. But they're going to have the cash to splash, and they're going to be able to target those off-contract players like a Tom Green, like a Bo McCreary, like a Chad Warner. But it'll just be interesting to see how they present that's coming down to Tasmania. It's obviously a very unique area. It's not necessarily in the hustle bustle of Melbourne and Sydney like most players sometimes enjoy, but obviously you might need to appeal to the fact that it is quieter in comparison to the footy dominated town of Melbourne. So players like Tom Green, Chad Warner, that you can build around and say, hey, we've got these 2 players, marquee players, you can come down and you get to play with these guys, get to learn off these guys. I think will be huge for building that list.
It's going to be hard to get a Gary Ablett like the Suns did, and where they go down the GWS route and get kind of these senior players who, maybe outside Callum Ward and Ryan Griffin, probably weren't those close to that echelon that Ablett was. But can you try and tempt a Chad Warner to potentially look away from WA and look at Tassie? I look at players who probably are playing out of their home state already and might be a little bit comfortable already playing away from home, and then might look to Tassie. So Lockie Ash is one, is a regional Vic kid and playing up in GWS and has been potentially an All-Australian form this year. Caleb Sarong would be one of those big name recruits. Victorian boy, Vic country again, who's playing over in WA. Nick Martin from WA playing in Victoria. So there's going to be a few around. Trent Rivers is another one from WA, and Bo McCreary from SA, Will Days from SA. So can they, it might be hard to pull a player out from his own home state if he's already there, but can you get a guy to move states and be away from home again if they're already comfortable doing so at AFL level? So they're probably some of the names that Tassie might look at, but it's going to be quite fascinating to see what Hine and Patterson get to over the next 2 to 3 years. And then you mentioned Riley Sanders before, and this is kind of a nice little segue into our next talking point, is looking at the Dogs and their ridiculous depth and how well they've done in recruiting and in development. Probably over maybe the last few years. You don't have to date back all the way too much to, you look at their 2016 premiership side and the lack of players that are still at the club and the amount that they've lost, whether that be through retirement or rival recruitment. But you look at their side on the weekend, and this is a team that used to have Bailey Smith, Josh Dunkley, Caleb Daniel, Jack McRae, Lockie Hunter. It's without Jamara. Liam Jones currently dropped / injured, and then they lose Sam Darcy as well to injury, and how well they've been performing this year. And you go back a few weeks ago, they didn't have Bont. Obviously, it was Adam Treloar's first game for the year. Liam Jones was in and out of the side, obviously due to those injuries. But you've got Joel Frazier, who's arguably the most improved player this year. If it's not him, it's probably Matt Kennedy, who we've talked about a little bit already on today's show. You've got Ed Richards, who's playing like an all-Australian caliber player. And probably you look at him and you probably understand why they maybe were a bit more open to losing a McRae and a Smith, just given that the caliber and player they've got in Ed Richards and the ceiling that he might have. So those three have been the big standouts. But then you go a bit further back, like Bailey Dale started his career, was playing early days as a forward in the VFL, and how well they've done to turn him into an all-Australian caliber defender. Lockie Bramble, they got off the scrap heap, and I don't think he's missed a game since he got picked up after being delisted by Hawthorn. Late draft pick. So as we mentioned, Fraser was pick 45. They got Sam Davidson at 51 last year. Obviously quite a known talent going into last year's draft, given he won the Fothergill Round Mitchell medal. Luke Cleary played as well. He was pick 61. Lockie McNeil was a rookie draft pickup. Obviously a bit of a later one, but Bailey Williams is having one of his best seasons. I think he would have been around for a decade now. And he was, pick 48 quite a while ago. So it's been a blend of recruitment and how well they go about at the draft, or in the trade space, and a lot of that goes to Sam Power. But then on the other side of it is you do have to develop them, and whether that's Beveridge or Annie's coaching staff and development team, they've just really struck it quite nicely, and it's really coming together in 2025. Yeah,
well, I think a point to that development is the fact that Luke Beveridge won't die trying in terms of swinging the magnets around. You can, as you mentioned, all those players have played multiple roles. That we saw Fraser at earlier parts of this year playing across halfback, and then there'll be spurts where he goes in the midfield for the last quarter and just breaks the game open or gets the Bulldogs back into the contest. You're saying, as you mentioned, Bailey Dale started as a forward, now gone back. Bailey Williams halfback, he's played wing, he's played even half forward.
Yeah,
they all play multiple roles, which is what the AFL modern day game demands. And I think Beveridge and his willingness to try these players out in different roles, in different types of areas of the ground, has really improved or sped up their accelerated their development. And this is why they're reaping the rewards now, because they've got players who can just plug and play. You go, as you mentioned, Bontempelli, Treloar out. They've got 4 or 5 players who can put their hand up and play against some of the best midfielders in the competition, but still perform at such a high level that they're competing against like a Lockie Neal, like against the Brisbane game, stuff like that. So yeah, definitely kudos to Beveridge. He's done it his whole career, and I think now he's even reaping more rewards. I know it's a bit of recency bias, but the way they're going at the moment, he definitely deserves a bit more plaudits.
Yep, probably an obvious one I left off was James O'Donnell as well. Like, it's just playing cricket. They go hand him an AFL contract, and I think he was playing a game within the first couple of months. He was at the club, which showed the immediate signs that he had in his return to footy, and now he's performing quite strongly. Rory Lobb's done quite well, and how they've gotten the most out of him after where his future was at early last year. And then you've got Jed Bustlinger now getting a look, and these are the kind of guys that were keeping Liam Jones out of the side. So, just wanted to touch on how well the Dogs are doing in that recruitment and development space, and where it's leading them to in 2025. Fun little exercise to finish off, or before we finish off. Potential first-time All-Australians in 2025. It's obviously a big discussion each year when you're going to get some of those guys who get their maiden All-Australian blazers, and some of the guys on this list you would have thought would have had 1 or 2 by now. But let's have a look across all lines defenders. Who's probably some of the first-time All-Australians we could see this year?
Well, yeah, Wangan Millero is one that obviously he's flying at the moment. He's got Adelaide and Port Adelaide coming hard for him as an SA boy, but St Kilda clearly want to keep him because he is a talented superstar. But I do like the work of Nick Loston. Kind of seen a few games of his live and also just on the telly as well. And he admittedly is under the pump consistently, given the fact that Richmond probably aren't performing as well, given the fact they're so young and are rebuilding. But his performances as, I guess, an intercept defender, locking down some of the medium-sized forwards on the opposition, but also helping out some of the younger teammates in his backline, I think, could potentially get a nod in that sense as well. But moving to the mids, there's a few names here that I'm even raised my eyebrows at in reading. And, Josh Dunkley and Hugh McCluggage are definitely ones that I thought probably would have got one by now.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, McCluggage, when he was a pure wingman, was probably stiff to not get selected when they usually pick some on-ballers on the wing. And Josh Dunkley certainly could have had one by now, you would think. And I think with the role he's playing at Brisbane, if it's not him, it's potentially McCluggage or Lachie Neale gets another Blazer. But one of those three, you can probably bet on having a Blazer by the end of the year. And Will Ashcroft actually could be another one who wouldn't have had one yet. Bailey Smith, as you mentioned, with where he's at with Geelong, and Max Holmes, his teammate, that one of those two certainly could be in the best 22 this point of the year. Ed Richards, another, I guess he's a current dog, but we've already mentioned Dunkley and Smith as his old teammates. Matt Rowell, Noah Anderson, George Hewitt's probably been the big surprise packet of this year at Carlton, where their midfield's at. So there's a few names there for the midfield, which usually bats quite deep. Like they probably take up 3 of the bench spots most years, on top of having both the wings, maybe a half forward. So I think there's some of the mids that potentially could get a spot for the first time in 2025.
Yeah. Now, Ruckman, obviously, I think we've probably agreed that Max Gawn is in the running clearly for an 8th. We did tip he's probably in the lead at the moment.
Yeah.
But Tom De Koning's year so far has been pretty spectacular.
Yeah, he's just dominant from his first game and of the year, and taking on that sole ruck job has really flourished this year. Obviously, quite an interesting season for him, given his future, but what he's been able to do for the Blues, in what has been a difficult year for the club. On the results front, he's been quite a dominant force. And Tristan Sherry probably came quite close last year, and it's going to be hard to rule him out. But you think those two are just behind Max, and then maybe a step off might be Tim English with how he's performing in the last couple of weeks. So,
or Darcy Cameron as well.
He's probably not one you can rule out. Lloyd Meeks another. Like the rucks, I think this year is just so strong across the whole competition. So it's going to be quite fascinating. And then forwards. What are you thinking about some of the forwards?
Well, Jack Higgins, I said I bought stocks in him earlier in the show. So I would like it, again, to see more forwards get recognised for their work as genuine forwards. We mentioned Dangerfield playing forward. Yeah. I know, obviously, he's got plenty of Blazers, so he might be in the running again. But for those who haven't gotten one so far, Isaac Rankin plays kind of 50-50 split, which you can see perfectly slotted on a half forward because that is essentially what that role is. But someone like a Jack Higgins and Paul Curtis playing predominantly at the feet of the big forwards and just applying pressure to the opposition clubs and back line, I think, they're looking like they're pushing their case for their maiden Blazer in 2025.
Yeah, you look at the talls, Thilthorpe maybe, Tracy maybe, Ben King maybe. So it's going to be quite fascinating to see how that all unfolds. And before we sign off, let's have a quick look at round 9. Pies Dockers, Thursday night's going to be interesting. It sounds like Collingwood will probably rest a few of their older guys. As we mentioned earlier, Carlton and St Kilda on Friday night. It's going to be quite a fascinating one. Gold Coast, if they can bounce back against the Dogs. Got the showdown, of course, on Saturday night as well. And then, I don't know, maybe Geelong, GWS. What kind of game sticks out to you at the moment?
Well, yeah, Geelong, GWS. I think the Cats are flying at the moment. But the Giants, I think 3 losses in a row now, if I'm not mistaken. So they do need to bounce back because they've gone from a great start to now kind of middle tier. And their running game, their scoring game has gone out the window, which is a bit of a shock because everyone saw them bounce out in the first 3-4 weeks or the opening month anyway. And they said, premiership favourites, they kind of leapfrogged Brisbane, although they'd won the flag the year before. So they do need to bounce back, and I know it's a tough task. I think it's in Geelong, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
So, again, not many people win down there, but I think the Giants perform.
They've got a pretty good record,
Yeah, they're okay down the highway there. So that's one I'll be keeping an eye on closely, just to see, 1, if the Giants bounce back, and 2, if Geelong can kind of back up such a great win against Collingwood and, again, put themselves where they usually are in, the top 4.
Yeah. I think Thursday night, Freo hosting Collingwood, like Pies, obviously quite a difficult one and a short turnaround for them. So Fremantle could be a sneaky chance here. I think they won't go in favourites, but at home, and their form's just been up and down. So after a down week last week, hopefully they respond. It's going to be quite an interesting one to see how the tactics in St Kilda Carlton go, because I think there's been a lot of questions on Voss's game plan, and then Ross is just quite a mastermind in making sure he can punish some of his opposition. Showdown's probably the headline act, as it's probably one of the best games to watch every year. Would have been nice if Dan Houston was still playing for Port, just given what happened in the last showdown last year. But you'd think Adelaide go into this one quite comfortable. And then one, it's not going to be might not be the best game to watch, but Richmond West Coast. The Eagles will really look at this one as a chance to get their first win. The Tigers will want that little bit of a confidence booster as well. So it's going to be quite interesting to see how those two go head to head. So that's all to come, and we'll obviously have all the best parts of the weekend to reflect on in next week's episode of the Hitout. Anything else we have to shout out at the moment? We're all good.
I think we covered everything.
Done well without Phoenix.
We did.
Yeah.
We can probably keep him on the sidelines.
Yeah, he'll be back next week if for those that have been waiting to see him. But
and all his Melbourne hot takes as well.
But anyway, in the meantime, you can head over catch all our latest draft stuff at Craft the Draft. You can head to zerohanger.com for all the latest news, views, and opinions on the footy.